Welcome to this course on Ajax and PHP. Today we will talk about the PHP web programming language and also how to install and deploy a web stack, including an Apache web server, a database server like MariaDB, and of course the PHP interpreter. We'll also talk about asynchronous, sending asynchronous requests from the browser to the server, and that is Ajax. Okay, let's start. First, what is PHP? The initial name of PHP was personal homepage, but then it changed to a recursive definition, namely PHP hypertext preprocessor. It is a server-side programming language. It is in a lot of ways similar to JavaScript, so the topic of our previous course, because it has it's a loosely typed language, and so there is no type bound, or a variable is not bound to a type throughout the execution of the program. And a lot of other similarities that you will see, but still, JavaScript it's a client-side web programming language, meaning it is interpreted and run in the browser. Although there is the Node.js, which is a JavaScript version for the server side, but the one that we've studied so far is the client-side JavaScript. So JavaScript, it's a client-side web programming language. It is executed in the browser, and PHP, it's a server-side web programming language, meaning it is executed within the web server. So it is simple and efficient. It is free and open source. It runs mostly on the Apache web server, but also on the Internet Information Server from Microsoft. And the home URL is this one, www.php.net. The first PHP example would be this one. Well, a PHP file is just a regular HTML document, or regular any other document, but it needs to have the PHP extension, and in this document, all the text that is not included in this specific question mark PHP tag is displayed the way it is. So this HTML head and body and test and break, they are sent by the server to the browser the way they are. And the only thing that it's different is for the code, for the text that's inside this question mark PHP tag, and instead of sending this text echo first example to the browser, the server runs the PHP interpreter on this code, and the output of the PHP interpreter on this code echo first example would be sent as a string to the browser, which displays it. So everything in a PHP file, everything that's not inside a question mark PHP tag is sent by the server or by the PHP interpreter to the browser the way it is. Only the text or only the code that's written inside the question mark PHP tag is interpreted by the PHP interpreter, and its output is sent to the browser in order to be displayed. Let's see this first example in action. So this first, I have here an Apache web server running on the local host. I'll show you how you can install this in the second part of today's course. This first PHP file, if I run it, it'll be this one. I can show you the source because I cannot see the source here in the browser window. If I look at the source, it will be just a regular HTML file. But here the actual source of the PHP file. The actual source of the PHP file would be this one. So this is the source. It's actually the example. Is this example? Okay. So this is the source, and you see that instead of this line, so every other lines instead of this one are displayed the way they are. And instead of this line, this code is executed, which of course, if you are familiar with shell programming from the operating system class, this code just prints this text, first example, and you can actually see it here in the source that is sent to the browser. Yeah, you see every other tag, so every tag is displayed the way it is written in the PHP source file, but instead of this tag, we actually have the output of this tag, which is just the text first example, and you can actually see it here. Yeah. Now an observation first. When I write something, when I write the URL of a PHP file here in the browser window, and then I press enter, there would be, let me show you the web console. So there will be a request. So when I press enter, there will be a request. This one sent by the browser to the server, to the web server that runs on localhost. I'll show you how you install a web server in the localhost in the second part of today's course. So this request is sent to the web server. The web server responds with the status 200, which means okay. So it responds with a text, which is actually this one, this text that is displayed by the browser. This text is, if I click here and view page source, is just this one, okay? And the browser just displays this text, okay? So the browser sends this request to the web server. The web server executes or interprets using the PHP interpreter, interprets the first PHP file, and and sends the output of this interpretation to the browser, which displays this output. And the way the PHP interpreter interprets this file, and this file is here, is exactly as I've told you. So it print everything that's not within this question mark PHP tag. So leave everything the way it is. And for the text or for the code that's written inside PHP question mark PHP tags, there can be several question mark PHP tags. Execute this code and just send the output of this code to the browser. Okay, so that's what the PHP interpreter does. Ignore or print everything the way it is, except for the text that's inside this question mark PHP tag, which is not printed the way it is, but instead it is executed by the PHP interpreter, and its output is printed to the web server, which then sends it to the browser, which then displays it like this. Okay. Let me lift this one because we may need it more. Okay. So this is the first PHP example, very simple one. Let's move on. A little bit of PHP history. I've told you that the initial name of PHP was Personal Homepage. It was invented in 1995 as a set of CGI scripts written in C. CGI comes from Common Gateway Interface. There will actually be a second course after this course that talks about the whole interaction between the browser and the web server through the HTTP protocol, and how we can send data from the browser to the server, and what does actually mean server-side web programming. I'll show you the prehistorical way of doing server-side web programming that's using CGI script, Common Gateway Interface. And so there will be a second course following this course about that. This course, it's not very important, although it's still relevant to see what actually server-side web programming means. You will see there that any form of server-side web programming, including PHP, JSP or Java servlets or ActiveX server pages from Microsoft or Node.js, they all do the same thing with in different ways, in different flavors. So it's a useful course, this course on CGI and HTTP, so that you get a high view picture on server-side web technologies. Okay, so initially PHP started as a set of CGI scripts written in C for tracking access to a web page. It also included database access and server-side functionality. It was written by Rasmus Lerdorf. And this was in 1995 when PHP was named Personal Homepage Forms Interpreter. Then in 1997 we have PHP Forms Interpreter version 2.0. Then in 1997 we have PHP 3.0, and the name changed to the name that we have today, PHP Hypertext Preprocessor, a recursive definition. It was a complete rewrite by Andy Gutmans and Zev Zeratsky. And then in 1999, 2000, we have PHP version 4, which introduced the Xampp engine. Then in 2005, we have PHP 5.0, which introduced Xampp engine 2.0, which had a new object model and features. Then 2015, we have PHP 7 Xampp engine number 3, which has more compact data structures, cache, new language features. And the latest version is PHP 7.4 from 2019. Then the way we can, let's talk a little bit about the way we can insert PHP code in HTML files. I've told you that PHP file is just an HTML document with a PHP extension, and inside this document we have regular HTML tags, but now and then we have a PHP code that is interpreted by the PHP interpreter. And the PHP code is usually, most of the time, written inside this $PHP tag, but it can also be written inside the script language PHP tag, or inside this $tag, or this one, which just replaces the value of this PHP expression with its actual value. And also we can use Microsoft ASP style tags like this one. So we have 4 ways of writing PHP code in HTML documents. The most used one, and the one that we will be using, is the first one, this one. And this is actually the one that I've shown you before in this example. Okay, so $PHP tag. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about PHP variables. As I've told you, PHP, it's a loosely typed language, or a dynamical language, meaning that a variable can change its type throughout the execution of the program. Something very notable is the fact that a variable name, whether it is defined or when we use it, it needs to be preceded by the $sign. So this is very specific to PHP. And of course, there's no type required, or there's no type specified when the variable is defined. We see here some examples. This one is a variable of type string. This one is a variable of type integer. This one is a variable of type real or float. This one is a vector, an array containing 5 values. This one is a Boolean type variable. Still about variables, by default, variables are always assigned by value, like this. So if we write something like this, and then we write something like this, then the x1 variable will be equal to the value of the x variable, which is test. But we can also assign them by reference, like this, and here, if we change x1, x will change automatically because x1 is a reference to x. It's an alias of x. Variables need not be initialized, although this is good practice and recommended, so you should initialize your variables. If not, they have a default value depending on the context. In Boolean context, they have a default value of false. In numerical context, they have the default value of 0, and so on. A useful function is var_dump for printing information about variable $var, the variable var. And you can use this function in order to debug your PHP code. Now the scope of the variable, the scope of PHP variables. So every PHP variables have a single scope, which is the context within the variable is defined, either function or file. The scope also includes required and include files. You will see what these are, but they are similar to the include construct in C and C++, when you include another file, an external file, into this current file. So here we have an example where we include the content of this file into the current PHP file, and because we have a variable called n in the current file, this n would be visible in the included file. That's what it means that the scope includes required and include files. So we have the scope of regular PHP variables is either local or static, but it's only one. And it's either local or global, but it's only one. And the global scope does not include the local scope, and you'll see what this means in a second. So we have local variables, which are variables defined inside the function. So we have this foo function here, and this n would be undefined here because it is considered a local variable, as opposed to this n, which is a global variable. And the global scope does not include the local scope. They are different. That's what I said. That's why I said that regular PHP variables have a single scope. And then we can have static variables which have the same scope, but they exist throughout the execution of the whole PHP code. So here we have a local variable n, but this local to this function. So the scope of this variable is this function. It can only be accessed inside this function, but because it is declared static, it is not reserved on the stack, but it is reserved on the data segment. So it keeps its value between subsequent calls to the test function. Okay. So first n would be initialized to 0. On the second test call, it will be 1 due to this incrementation, and on the third one, it will be 2, and so on. So these are static variables, and in these examples, the variables have in this one and this one, the variables have local scope, and this one here has global scope. A little bit more about the global scope. So global variables. Global variables are variables declared outside any functions. Inside a function, we can refer to global variables by writing global in front of them, like this. So here, global, here the variables a and b refer to the global versions, having the values 2 and 2. If we add them together, they will return 4. So C will be 4 because a and b refer to the global variables a and b. Global variables can also be accessed through the globals array, like this. So instead of writing global $a and $b like this, we can write globals indexed by the variable name a and globals indexed by the variable name b. The globals array is an associative array. All arrays in PHP are associative arrays, so key value pairs array. So globals array is an associative array having as index or as key the name of the global variable, and the value or the content is the actual content of the variable. And the globals array does not need to be declared using the global prefix, because the globals array has the superglobal scope. And the superglobal scope means that any superglobal variable is available in all scopes throughout the script. So in any function, any included file, any global file, there's no need to declare a superglobal variable as global in a local function, and they were introduced in PHP 4. We have so the superglobal variables are predefined. We have these globals that you've already seen. It contains references to our variables defining the global scope of the script. We have then this underscore server superglobal variables, which contains information such as header paths and script's location. It is built by the web server. As the browser sends a request to the web server, the web server builds this superglobal variable underscore server, and it passes to the PHP interpreter. Also, there is the get post files and cookies, and these are also built by the web server and passed to the PHP interpreter. Underscore get superglobal contains the variables, the variables or the fields passed by the browser to the web server through an HTTP GET request. You will see examples today. Many examples of this today. Then the underscore post, it's a superglobal array that contains variables or fields passed by the browser to the web server using the HTTP post method. Then $underscore files is superglobal arrays of file items that were uploaded by the browser to the web server. Underscore cookie, it's a superglobal array of variables that support web sessions, and you will see more on this later on today. Then underscore session is also array variable, contains session variables available to the current script. So underscore cookie and underscore session refer to web sessions. Web sessions are a bunch of HTTP requests, that belong to the same user. Yeah, so they form a session. But I'll tell you more about this in the second part of today's course, when we talk about sessions. There's also a superglobal array called underscore request, which contains the contents of the underscore get or underscore post and underscore cookie. And then there's underscore env, which it's an array of variables passed to the current script via environmental variables. And if the register global directive, which is a directive from the PHP configuration file, if this directive is on, then the variables from the superglobal arrays are available in the global scope without declaring them. Some example. So for this one, which is deprecated, but this HTTP underscore post underscore var, it's an array, but it has the global scope. So in order to use it inside this function, inside this test global function, we need to declare it as global like this, and then we use one of its components. As opposed to underscore post, which is a superglobal array, which does not need to be defined as global inside this function. So we just use it because the scope of this array is superglobal and the scope of this array is just global. Okay, more on the globals array. So we see here another example here. This one is a function called test. This one is a function called test. Here it has a local variable named foo, and here I just display foo in the global scope by indexing foo in the globals super array, and here I display the value of the local variable foo. So and then I have another variable which is a global one named foo. So I have a global foo variable and a local foo variable. They both have the same name, but they have different values. This is example content, this is local variable. And then I call this function test, this one. Okay, so this echo, which accesses the global foo variable, will print the value of the global foo variable, which is example content. You see it here. First example content. And then the second echo, which just prints something on the screen, is it prints the value of the local variable foo, which is this one, local variable, which is, so the print is visible here. Okay, local variable. So that's the difference between local variables and global variables. Now we should talk a little bit about the underscore server superglobal array, which is this one. So underscore server, we'll talk a little bit about this one. Okay, it contains the file name, PHP self, the file name that is currently executed, the server address, which is the IP address of the web server, server protocol, usually HTTP or HTTPS, the request method. It can either be get, post, head, put, delete. The query string, which is simply said the parameters sent by the browser to the web server. You'll see more on this when we do more complicated examples, more complicated PHP examples today. And then the document root, which is the document root of the web server under which this current script is executed. It's actually a configuration directive for the web server. The remote address, which is the address of the client, the IP address of the client, the remote port, the IP, the port of the client, that is the browser, and the value of the accept field in the HTTP header. Then another superglobal variable is superglobal array variable is underscore get, which actually contains the parameters sent by the browser to the server using through an HTTP GET request. I have here an example. Let me show you this in the browser. Okay. So we will be using this input, and I think, I'm not sure. Well, let's open the input and first PHP files. So let's close this. Yeah, don't need the first one. Okay. Let's open the input. I have here a form that is useful for sending information to the server. Okay. And then I have here two input fields of type text, one with the name fname and the other one with the name age. And then I have here a button, and if the user clicks this button, then the information input by the user in these two fields, text and fname and age, will be sent to this script, second PHP, using the HTTP method get. Let's check the second PHP file. Second PHP. Okay. This one is okay. Let me just write another one. So let me just write a new file and paste this, but we don't need this anymore. And here, because I'm using because in the input HTML, I'm using the HTTP get method, then I need to use here the underscore get superglobal array, which I've told you it contains the values or the fields sent, the values sent by the browser to the web server using an HTTP GET request. If here, and actually I'll show you this example, if here we would have had the post method. Then I needed to use here the underscore post superglobal array. Okay, let me save this one into, so here we should have, okay, I need all files. Let me so parse PHP. Let's say parse PHP. Okay, and here in input, I'll close this one because I don't need it yet. Here I'm telling the browser that this form should send its information to the parse PHP script, which is this one, which just takes the values from the get superglobal and displays them. Okay. So let's see what these are. These two files. So input and parse are placed here on the web server. This is the directory of the web server that I have running on the local host. So I can access them here. So let me do a refresh. Okay, let me first click input and then let's write a forest, and my age is 41 and submit. So you see here there's a request sent here. You see the URL. So there's a request sent to localhost, to WP, to simple examples, to parse PHP. That is this file, parse PHP. See it here. With the query string. The query string is the one written after the question mark here, which is equal to a set of name equals value pairs separated by an ampersand sign. So we have two name value pairs. One is fname equals forest and the other one is age equals 41. And then the parse PHP script just takes fname, which is forest, and displays it here, and the age and displays it here. So this code takes the value of fname and this one takes the value of age and it displays them. And instead of seeing this code and this code, we actually don't see this code because they are the code is already interpreted by the PHP interpreter and only its output is sent back to the browser. So here in the browser, if I'm trying to see the source, I only see simple text, okay? Because the PHP code is already interpreted by the web server, by the PHP interpreter or the web server, and when it gets to the browser, I only see the output of that code. Okay. I actually didn't need it. I actually didn't need the input HTML file. I could have written. I could have called the PHP file directly, parse PHP, and send a query string here. Let's say fname equals something, and age equals minus 1. Okay, and it displays welcome something, you are -1 years old. If I'm using, because here in the source file, so here in the source file I index, here in the source file here in the source file, I'm indexing the underscore get superglobal variable using the fname and age keys, and these are of course these are sent by the input HTML file like this. So the browser automatically sets the name of the first input field to the one I've specified here, fname, and the name of the second input field to this name, age, I've specified here. And the PHP file index the underscore get variable using the fname and age. Fname and age indexes. We can actually print the value of underscore get superglobal variable using var dump. So let's try it. PHP var dump and $_get, right, and then question mark and like that. So let's save it and try to run it again. So yeah, okay, so we can actually see that here, this is the print. We can see that the _get superglobal variable, it's an array with two values, two elements. The first one is a string, something, and the key of this is fname, and the second one is age with the value -1, of course. But we can set another name here, because now we are sending the values of we're actually sending the query strings ourselves without using without using VP simple, right? Okay, so instead of using the browser to send the values of this field, so by writing here forest and here I don't know 22 and then submit, instead of using the browser to send this request and to form the query string, here I'm forming the query string myself. So I can write here the field, let's say ABC, and this, with the value something, and the name of the second field will be EDF. Okay, in which case the value of the _get superglobal variable will be this one. Okay, so the key, the key or the index of the first component will be ABC, because it is written here ABC, and the value is something like here. And the key of the second component, the second element of the vector of the _get superglobal vector, would be EDF with the value -1. Of course, the rest of the PHP script will fail, because there is no fname index in this array, in this _get array, and there's no age index in this array. Okay, so we cannot index this with fname and age, because they don't exist anymore. So the elements with those indexes don't exist anymore. We only have ABC and EDF. Okay, so hopefully you've understood. You can also see it here, the query string and the whole HTTP request. Let me make this smaller, a little bit smaller. Okay, so we probably don't need this anymore. Yeah. Right, let's go back to the presentation. No, we still have one example to do. Yeah. So here in this input, file, we've sent the parameters or the fields from the browser, what the user input in this text field. We've sent this. We also need the web console. So we've sent this. We've sent this to the server using an HTTP GET request. You see this because the query string is in the URL here, and we can also see it here. The request method is get. Okay, but we can change this so that we have the request method post. So let's change this file by specifying here post. Actually, I should write this with capital letters. Okay, and then the input fields are the same, name and age with the same names. Okay, let's see what happens now. So let's reload this. Yeah, we should clear this now. And here we have forest and age, let's say 22, and submit. Okay, the value of the _get array is now 0. It doesn't have anything because the method is post. The HTTP request method is now post, not get. So now, if we want this parse PHP string to work, we need to use _post superglobal array. Okay. We'll just leave this _get var dump the way it is. It will be an empty array. But this one should now work because the parameters of the request are sent using an HTTP post request, and they are filled and they are inserted in this underscore post superglobal array by the web server in the PHP interpreter. Let's save it, and so now let's try to resend the request, and now we see that welcome Forrest, you are 22 years old. Of course the underscore get superglobal array is still empty because the parameters are in the underscore post superglobal array. Actually the script for this, for parsing the HTTP post request, is this second PHP. Okay, it gets the parameter from the underscore post. Okay, and this one we'll load it in a minute in the browser. This one submits using the HTTP post request, submits this input fname and this input age to itself, to the document, to this document itself. Okay, let's load it, second PHP. Okay, it's second PHP. So first I have this error because there were no parameters submitted yet. They will only be submitted to this document after I click this submit. Okay. We can also sorry, let's see now. So Forest 22, and now submit, and now we see 22 years old. Okay. The idea is that if we submit data using HTTP GET, so if I submit data using HTTP GET here, then the parameters or the data is submitted from the browser to the server in the head of the request. Here in the URL, you've seen it in the URL. So let me load it again. So input, let's write here. So this is let me change. Save this. Okay, so data is submitted here. Okay, in the head of the request. And you also see it here in the head of the request. Okay, the method is get. But if I change method to post, then the data will be submitted in the body of the request. It will not be visible here, which is useful for submitting passwords, for example. Okay. So let's reload input, and now let's submit it again. So now I submit it, but I don't see the data, the parameters here as the query string. Okay, it's not visible in the URL because the data is not submitted using it's not submitted in the HTTP, in the head part of the HTTP request, but in the body part of the request. We no longer see it here, the method is post, but we can see it in the body of the request here. Form data fname Forest, age 22. Okay. And it's actually this value that's submitted, okay, in the body of the request. So this is the difference between sending data from the browser to the web server using HTTP GET, where data is sent in the head of the HTTP request. You can see it here in the URL. And sending data from browser to the server using HTTP post, where the data is sent in the body of the request and it's not visible here anymore. From a PHP point of view, I can access the data by indexing. When the method is get, I need to index the get superglobal array, and when the data is sent using HTTP post, I need to index the underscore post superglobal array. So hopefully this is clear. No? Let me see the other examples. So parse second first. Okay, first you've already seen, and there's an example using an array here. This one, and this one is here, which just defines an array containing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 components. The key of the first one is 0. Okay, you see it here. The key of the second one is 4. The keys of arrays can be integers or strings. This one has key 4, integer, and the value 45. I've told you that arrays are multi-associative structures, dictionaries, so key value pairs structures. Then the index of this component is the index of the previous one plus 1. You see it here, it's 5. The index of the next one is 6, so the index of the previous plus 1. This one is 7, and this one has a string key, bb. Okay? Right? And this one has the index of the previous numerical index, which is 7 plus 1. Okay, so 8. So 7, 8. Okay. So this is this example, and here I'm parsing this array, and I'm parsing it and printing the key and the value. I'm parsing it like this. So this is the array, and I get the key and the value of each element of the array, and then I show the key and the value. I need to precede every name, every variable name with a $sign, of course, because it's PHP. Let me get back to the presentation. So these were the first PHP examples where I've shown you how we can submit data from the browser to the server. This is the get example. I've run over this quite quickly. I'll discuss more about sending data from the browser to the web server in this other course about HTTP and CGI, Common Gateway Interface. Now I need to get over with the PHP course so that you have enough material in order to solve the PHP lab task. So this is the example I've just shown you with sending a PHP with sending an HTTP GET request and obtaining the data in PHP at the server. This is the example with sending the data from the browser to the server using HTTP post and getting the data in PHP using the _post superglobal array. Now let's talk a little bit about functions. Functions are defined very similar to the way they are defined in JavaScript. So function, function name. Although PHP it's not it does not have functional programming features the way JavaScript has. So variables with the value of a function, anonymous functions, and so on. The formal parameters need to be preceded by a $sign, the way any variable in PHP needs to be preceded by a $sign. So function name, these are the parameter statements, and eventually your return statement. This is an example of sum function, a function that adds two numbers and it prints the result. And here you see what I call the function which returns 17. You also see here an application of the automatic type conversion system, just like in JavaScript. A value is automatically converted to a specific type depending on the context. Here it's a string context, this one is a string, this one is the string concatenation operator. So add 16, which results into the number 17. So 17 is automatically converted to a string and concatenated to this one, so that it will print 1 plus 16 equals 17 on the screen. Object-oriented programming in PHP. This is a simple example. Declaring objects and classes in PHP is very similar to the way we do it in other high-level object-oriented programming languages like C++ or Java. We declare a class like this. We specify the property or the properties or the fields like this, also using the $sign. They can be public, protected, or private. More on this in a subsequent slide. Here we have a method called display variable, which is also public, and I need to index all local properties. I need to index them or access them using the $this prefix, $this and an arrow prefix, because $this is actually a reference, a constant reference to the current document, so I need to dereferentiate it in order to access the var property. Here I'm instantiating an object of this simple class. Here I'm extending, so in class inheritance, I'm extending this simple class with the extended class, and I really find a method display var, where I just print something and I call this super method, which is the method of the parent. And here I'm instantiating an object of the extended class and call display var method, which is this one, which just prints a text and then calls the display var method from the parent. So this is a simple example of defining classes and objects. You will see more examples of PHP classes and objects when I'll show you the link between PHP and MySQL or MariaDB database later on today. Okay, PHP treats objects as references. You've seen that $this is a constant reference to the current object. So a variable contains the reference to an object, not the actual object, not the entire object. We have some reserved keywords new for creating an object, just like in other object-oriented programming languages. Then we have a class for declaring a class. This for referring to the local object, to the current object. Extends for inheritance. Construct for defining a constructor function. Destruct for defining a destructor function. And visibility, access modifiers, public, protected, and private. As a note, if I declare a field or a property with var, then this means public. This is actually a public default. Okay, some other example with class visibility. This is a public field. This is a protected field, which is accessible only in the code of this class. So this is a public field, which is accessible in the code of this class and outside the class. This is a protected, which is accessible only in the methods of this class and in the methods of classes inheriting from this class. So which extend this class, and a private field is just a field that can be accessed only in the methods of the my class. This one cannot be accessed outside of the class in classes that extend this class or in code that instantiates objects of this class. Just like in other object-oriented programming languages. The types of the PHP programming language are Boolean, true or false, but because of the automatic type conversion system, a non-zero numeric value or an empty string or an empty array will be automatically converted to false. Null is also automatically converted to false, and other values are automatically converted to true in Boolean context. Then we have numbers, integer numbers, float, and double. Integers are in decimal, so in the decimal base. We can also use the hexadecimal base by prefixing the literal with 0x, or we can use the octal base by prefixing the literal with 0. Another type is string, another type is array. You've already seen a little bit how we can manipulate arrays in PHP. Then we have objects, which is just a reference to a class instance. Then we have resource, which is a reference to an external resource like curl session, FTP session, database link, or PDF document. a resource is created and manipulated using special functions. Then null is another type, which is a variable with no value, meaning that no value has been set, or the variable has been unset, and in this case this variable has a null value. And then we also have pseudo types like mixed, callback functions, or void, for a function that returns void. The string type, PHP doesn't natively support Unicode characters, meaning that for PHP a string is just a sequence of bytes. But it relies on specialized functions in order to manipulate Unicode UTF-8, UTF-16 characters. Although we can declare Unicode characters like this using hexadecimal notation. And in order to manipulate Unicode strings, we need to use multi-byte string functions, MB string functions, which is just a PHP extension, MB string. There are 4 ways of defining a string literal: using single quotes like this, using double quotes like this, using the here.doc syntax, which is like this. This keyword, which is not a reserved keyword, but it needs to appear here and here, so the string is between this keyword. Okay, this is the closing identifier. And the now.doc syntax is the same as the previous syntax, but here there's no parsing done inside the string. So here, if I have variable names, they will be replaced by the actual value of those variables. So this string is parsed by the PHP interpreter before being assigned to this one in the here.doc syntax. In the now.doc syntax, this string is not parsed. It's just placed, it's not parsed by the PHP interpreter, it's just placed there as normal string. So in the double quotes in here.doc here.doc syntax, variables are parsed within those string values, and in single quotes in now.doc syntax they are not. We can use 2 syntaxes for variables inside a string value. So one is the simple one. So if we just precede the variable name using a $sign, so we have, for example, if we have this string, this code which just prints this string will be some text, and instead of $var we'll actually have the value of the var variables. Okay, but if we have a variable that's more complex, so it's not of a simple type like this one, then we can refer it using curly brackets. We can refer to it using curly brackets like this, in which case this example prints this text, and then it accesses this object, it accesses the vect method of this object, it indexes the vect method using key foo, and that is also an object, and then it selects the val property of this other object, and this val property is replaced, or this is replaced with the value of the val property in this string. Okay, so this is a more complex specification of a more complex object. A string can be indexed, of course, so this one refers to the 4th character of the string. A string, in a string context, all other types or other values are automatically converted to strings. Here the number 23 is automatically converted to the string 23, true is automatically converted to 1. And in numeric context, strings are automatically converted to numbers, to integer floats like this. Okay, so this 2 space ZZ is automatically converted to 2 and added to 1, so that the result is 3. We also have this dot, which is the string concatenation operator. Plus is not concatenation, it's the arithmetic addition. We have some useful string functions. Some of them are here. So functions for displaying strings, echo, we've already seen, printf from C. For hashing, crypt, MD5, SHA. For tokenizing, string tokenizer, explode. For string manipulation, trimming, so removing space, replacing string, shuffle, splitting string into tokens, word count, search a character, compare strings, length of string, search a string, position, upper, lower, substring, so on. And for parsing input, we have scanf, which is the function that we have in C. Arrays, we've already talked a little bit about arrays, but here is more. So arrays are, arrays in PHP are dictionaries, so order maps, key value pair sequences. Keys, as I've already told you previously, can only have integer or string values. If there's no key specified for an element, the value of the previous key plus 1 is used. Key start at 0. You've seen the example, you've seen this example. Shown you this example of array. Sorry, you see that the key of this element is just the key of the previous integer key element, which is this one, plus 1, 8. Because the key of this element is string, it is ignored. So we, in order to compute this key, it uses the key of the previous integer key element. Okay. Yeah. So key start at 0. We have here some examples. This one has 3 elements. The first one has the key A, the second one has the key 2, the third one has the key 36. And the value is easy. Then we have here another array which has an integer with the key, so integer 40 with the key 4, integer 67 with the key 5, 87 with the key 6, and then 3 with the key B, which is a string. So actually this array is the same as this declaration. Okay, then we have another array, which is a multi-dimensional array. This one has the first component with the key 2 has the value C. The second component with the key 45 is another array, which contains 2 components, 11 and 34. So this is a multi-dimensional array. We can access a component of the array by indexing it. So this is this array, we can index it like this, using the key as index, so 2. This one would be v2 would be this element, and v index fact would be this element, index 1 would be this element, 3. We can define an array by just specifying a value for a component, like this. We just specify that v is a vector having one component with the value 3 and the key 2. We can remove a key value pair from an array using unset and the actual element or the actual component, or we can remove the whole array using unset $v, like this. Any primary value, like boolean, integer, float, string, can be converted automatically to an array with only one component, having at index 0 that value. Some useful functions: count, which counts the number of elements of an array, or sort, which sorts it, and we can parse it like this, where p would be where the variable p will take as values all the values of the person's array. You've already seen an example before. Okay, some functions useful with types. We can get a type, the current type of a variable like this. We can convert it like this. We can check whether it is an array, whether it is a binary, boolean, buffer, callable, and so on. Operators are the regular operators in a high-level programming language. Arithmetic operators, this one's arithmetic plus assignment, like this one's. Comparison operators, like this one's. This is the identity operator, just like in JavaScript. So in order to be In order for two expressions to be triple equal, they need to have the same value and have the same type. This is the opposite of, so not identical. A bitwise operator, and, or, bitwise, XOR, not, bit shifting to the left, to the right. Logical operators, and, or, not, and, or, XOR. String operators, dot, which is a concatenation, ternary operator, which evaluates this expression. If this expression is evaluated to true, the result of this expression is this one, and if this is evaluated to false, the result of this expression is this one. Okay, some other operators. We have a special operator, a round, this one. If this one is placed in front of an expression, if the expression generates an error, there will be no error message generated. We have the execution operator, just like in shell from the Linux operating system. Wherever you write, you can write Linux commands inside this inverted apostrophes. Actually, for this example, the result this shell command is executed, and the output of this command is placed here as the value of this output string. We have cast operators, where you specify the type in round brackets. We have array operators. This one performs the reunion of arrays A and B, meaning that duplicate keys are not overwritten. This one checks whether these two arrays have the same key value pairs. This one checks whether these two arrays have the same key value pairs and in the same order and of the same type. This one is true if A and B does not have the same key value pairs, and this one is the opposite of this identity operator. Okay, constants. The scope of the constants is global, so they have global scope, meaning they are accessible outside of each function. We can define them using define. This is the name of the constant, the value of the constant. The constant name does not need to be prepended with a $sign. Only variables need to be prepended with a $sign. So you see here an example. Some predefined constant that you see here, predefined by the PHP environment. So this one defines the current line, the current file, the current directory, current function, class, and so on. The instructions of PHP are the same instructions as in other high-level programming language. So the conditional instruction, if else, the loop instruction while, the generalized if, which is switch, the do while, which is similar to this while, break in order to escape from a loop, continue in order to do the next iteration in a loop, the regular for in C and Java, this for parsing the elements of a vector of an array using just the values, the components of the array. This one uses the values and the keys of each component. Some other instructions, instead of writing curly brackets for a block like this, we can write a column like this, and then end the block using end while for while, or end if for if, or end switch for switch, or end for. Okay. We also have return to return from a function. We also have goto, which is not used that much nowadays, which is similar to an assembly jump. So it jumps this one, so it increments I, and then it jumps, the execution jumps to label, so it's like a cycle here. But goto is not used that much. I think I've only used it once in my life, I'm not sure. I think in a Java program, but I'm not sure. Okay, include and require. With include and require, we can add the text of an external PHP file into the current file. The only difference between include and require is that if this file settings PHP does not exist, no text is included or no text is added to the current file, but nothing happens. But if I have require and if this file does not exist, then of course nothing is included in the current file, but there will also be an error and the PHP parsing stops here if I'm using require. Okay. The code that's included in the current file inherits the variable scope of the line on which this include occurs. The PHP interpreter drops out of PHP mode and into the HTML mode in the beginning of the included file. So if I want in the included file, if I want to be in the PHP mode, the first tag of the included PHP file should be .PHP. And if allow URL fopen directive is enabled, the file included can also be specified by an URL, can also be a remote file. Okay, super global predefined variables. I've also told you about globals, underscore server, get, post, files, request, session, environment, cookie. There are also some others: PHP error messages, HTTP role post data, response header, arguments, and the number of arguments and the area of arguments. I'll not spend too much time on this. Cookies. Okay, cookie is just a small piece of data that is generated by the server and sent to the browser. And the browser stores it internally, and for each subsequent request sent by the browser to the server, the browser automatically appends the cookie to the request. This is useful. Let me show you the example. So this is useful when trying to relate two different requests sent to the browser. For example, I have this email account that I'm using. Okay. So let me log in. Yeah. The account is empty because all my emails are forwarded elsewhere. But we can see here. So, but if I'm trying to read again the inbox, then there will be a request sent here to the servers, and it tells me that I have nothing in the inbox. If I want to compose a new mail, I just click this one and then I compose it here. Let's say I go back. Okay, what you see here is that a bunch of requests, you see them here, a bunch of requests are sent to the web server from the same user, that is me. But the HTTP protocol does not support sessions. So because HTTP is a request response protocol, is a stateless request response protocol, meaning that it does not maintain state for a session. So it does not allow an HTTP server to relay or to figure out whether two different requests belong to the same human user, like here. So if I'm sending this request, okay, and this one, let me clear this. So if I'm sending this request and then this one and then another request I want to compose here or not, all these requests that you see here belong to the same user, the same human user, to me. HTTP does not allow an HTTP server to identify all these requests that belong to the same user. So normally the browser should send the username and the password, with each subsequent HTTP request that it sends to the server, so that the server knows that this specific HTTP request belongs to this human user. But if the browser would do this, then the user experience of the user would be badly degraded, because I have to write my username and password each time I'm clicking anything here and sending a request to the server. And the solution to this is using cookies. And what happens is, let me show you, let me start from the beginning. So let me log out, clear this, try to log in here, okay. Let me clear this out and log in. Okay. So here is the first login. Okay. Here I see the request. The actual the username and the password are sent through post, so you don't see them here in the URL, in the head of the request, and they are written below, but I won't show them. And let's look here at the response headers, and at the response headers, I see, well, all these fields: connection, content length, content type, date, expires. We don't care about them. We care about this set cookie, which just sets a cookie is just a small data or set of name value pairs, like this ones, generated by the server. So here the server generated this cookie with the name roundcube SSSout equals to del, and it expires here. Then it also generated roundcube sesID with this value, and roundcube sesout, another cookie. These cookies are sent by the web server in the response headers, okay, are sent to the browser. The browser saves them locally, okay, and with each subsequent request that the browser sends to the server, let me clear this out. Let's send another request to the server, like click here or send, yes, okay, or this one. Let me see here, yeah. So with this request, with this request, with this new request, the browser sends the cookies to the server. The cookies generated by the server previously. This one, roundcube session ID, roundcube sesout. It also sends these other cookies. These are from Google Analytics, also underscore JIT, underscore uname, and so on. So it sends this. It sends for each subsequent request that the browser sends to the web server. It attaches the cookies generated previously by the server. Okay, this one and this one. Yeah, and that's how the web server knows that this specific request, this one, belongs to the same user that sent that initial login request. Okay, but it's because of this cookie that are present in the request headers, this one. But I can clear these cookies, I can remove them from the browser, and then if I send another request to the web server has no way of knowing that this request belongs to the same user. Let's do this. So we can clear this cookie, we can remove them from the browser by going to, let's see if I remember where. We're going to settings, and then I should go here to site settings, cookie and site data, see all cookies and site data, and we should search here for SCS, and here we have 7 cookies. Let's see if I can see them. Roundcube SSH out, roundcube SSID, they are all generated by the SCS ubbcluj.ro server. Let's remove them all, right? Okay, and now let's send another request. Let's clear this because we don't need it. Let's send another request to the HTTP server. Okay, let's click this one. Okay, and because no cookie was sent from the browser to the web server, because I've just deleted the cookies from inside the browser, then the web server has no way of knowing that this subsequent request belongs to the same user. Okay, and that's why it replied me with this this login screen, because I need to log in again. Okay, because it has no way of knowing that this request belonged to the same user, because the browser did not send a cookie with this request, the cookie generated by the server, and the browser did not send a cookie because it didn't have the cookie anymore, because I've just deleted it from the browser. So hopefully you've understood now what is a session, which is just a set of requests belonging to the same human user, and how a session is implemented using cookies. So first, the browser authenticates the user by sending a username and a password to the server. The server generates a cookie, and the cookie is stored locally in the browser, and the browser sends this cookie with each subsequent request that it sends to the HTTP server, until the user logs out or the session is invalidated, because each cookie until the cookie is invalidated, because each cookie has an expiration date, so that a user does not stay authenticated or logged in forever. Okay, let me clear and close this. Yeah. Okay. Now cookies. So a cookie is just a small data used to identify a user. It has the form of user equal to a value. It is stored in the browser and generated by the server, and the browser sends the cookie with each subsequent HTTP request. In PHP, we can use cookies or we can use sessions. Sessions are usually implemented using cookies, but we'll talk about sessions in a couple of slides. Here is how I generate a cookie in PHP. I set the expiration time to be the current time plus, I think this is in seconds, yeah. And I set this cookie with this name. So this is the name of the cookie, and this is the value of the cookie, and the expiration time is this one. Then that cookie will, if I generate that cookie and send it to the browser, with each subsequent request from the browser, that cookie will be sent back to the server. And at the server in PHP, I can check whether the cookie is set. So if the user cookie is set, then I just display this message. Otherwise, I display welcome guest. I can delete a cookie by making it expire. So setting the expiration date in the past. So this is how I delete the user cookie. PHP sessions are just wrappers over cookies. They are used in order to create a session, to relate different requests, different HTTP requests to the same human user. A session, for each session, the PHP interpreter generates a unique ID, and for each so it generates a unique ID. I can store data in the session, I can store variables in the data on the server, and this unique ID is sent to the browser in a cookie or in the URL, propagated in the URL. Most of the time it is sent in a cookie. So there is a cookie. Actually, the cookies you've seen for the webmail service contain just a hash key that is used as an index into an array that is stored at a web server. So I can start a session like this with session start. So in this, when I'm calling this session start, the web server generates a session object into a session array, and the ID or the index of this session object is sent as in a cookie to the browser. Then I can store data in session. This data will be stored at the server side in the web server, and only the ID of the session object will be sent to the browser. Here I check whether the views value or the views key is stored into session. If it is stored, I just increment it. Otherwise, I store it. I initialize it and store it the first time. And then I'm just showing the views here. This is just a counter example for the current web page. So this is how I check whether we have a data in the session. Here, I'm using the underscore session superglobal array. And if I don't, I'm just setting it right now. So I'm adding a new element into the underscore session superglobal array with this key. Okay. I can free a session variable like this, unset underscore session views, or I can destroy the whole session using session destroy. Okay, before we go to MySQL, let me show you session examples. Let me try to load it here. By the way, all these examples that I have them here, yeah, all these examples that I have them here, they are the examples present on the courses webpage. They are these examples, PHP examples here, these ones. But I've downloaded them locally to my local web server, which is here. I've downloaded them locally here so that I can show you the source. Because if I run the examples in the browser, I don't see the PHP code. I only see the output. Okay, so I've downloaded them locally, and I'm using my local HTTP server to serve them, and then I'll show the code here in this Sublime editor. Okay, so every example that I'm showing right now is, although I show them from the local source, the local directory, every example is present here on the courses webpage. So let's go locally to this session example. Okay, so let's assume I have this secure page PHP, which just displays this information, which is private, and then it has this form that is similar to a logout because it destroys the session. Okay, if I'm trying to see the secure page PHP first, okay, let me show you here. So let's go here, session example. Okay, and I'm trying to view the content of secure page. Okay, if I'm trying to do this, I'm automatically redirected to the login page here. Why? Because so here I'm starting the session if it's not already started. So I'm initializing a session object if it's not already started for this user. And I check whether I have this valid user property into the session superglobal array. And if I don't have it, then I redirect the request to login HTML so that the user can log in. Okay? And this is what you've seen here. So the request is redirected. So I've sent a request here to secure page and then redirected using the status 302 to login HTML. Okay. The contents of login HTML is just a form which just it's a form which submits data to create session. It submits this user and this password to create session with the method get. I normally should use post so that you don't see the user and password in the URL. Let's see that. So let's write here the user Forest and the password 1. And then what happens is that this information is submitted to create session PHP. Normally here I should check in a database whether that user and that password are valid, but I skip this, so I consider they are valid every time. And I start a session if it's not already started, and I set it valid user equals 1 in the session, and also I set the user name of the session in the session object. And then I redirect everything to secure page PHP. So although I send a request to create session, the request is redirected to secure PHP. So now I see the information that is private. Okay. And then if I take this and then try to load it again, it'll still send me there because now the user is authenticated. But then if I click logout, what happens is that so in the secure page, if I click logout, if I click this logout, the request is sent to destroy session, which just destroys, unsets the valid user and destroys the session. So now if I'm trying to send, let's assume that I know this URL of this secure page and I'm trying to view it again. Now I cannot do this anymore because the session was destroyed and it sends me back to the login screen. So hopefully you've understood how we work with sessions. These are very useful in web programming because most applications require a user to be authenticated before allowing it to perform special operations like a webmail service or a file transfer web service or an electronic commerce website. So a lot of web services require sessions, require the user to be authenticated and to link all the HTTP requests to that user. So this is the way we can create sessions in PHP. Don't need this anymore. Okay. Now, before we go to PHP and MySQL, so there's going to be PHP. There are going to be a couple of slides about PHP and MySQL, and then about Ajax and PHP. Before we delve into this, I should show you how to install and deploy a web stack, a backend web stack. A web stack, it's actually a bunch of packages that allow you to do web development. They are called Xampp stacks because usually, Xampp stacks because usually they include an Apache web server, so A from Apache. The M comes from a database server like MySQL or MariaDB. MariaDB is a fork of MySQL. And P, the last Xampp, so the last P comes from PHP or Perl or Python. And there are a lot of packages containing web stacks. So LAMP, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, Perl, Python, Wamp. This is for Windows, Apache, MySQL, Python, and so on. PHP Triad, Easy PHP. There are a lot of them. I'm going to show you. I'm going to demonstrate how you can install this. Xampp web stack. And this Xampp contains the Apache web server, MariaDB database, phpMyAdmin, which is a bunch of PHP scripts useful for maintaining a MySQL or MariaDB database. And it also contains Tomcat, file server, but I won't be using those. So I will only be using the Apache web server, the Apache web server, MariaDB database, and phpMyAdmin. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to install the Xampp web stack. I have it already installed here on my local computer. You should go here, download, Xampp download. Okay, here. Okay, download the most recent version, which is this one, 64 bits. And the download starts. Okay, then open it. Yes. It will start in a minute. I will not go through with the whole install process. I'll go until right near the end when the actual files are written. I will not install it because I have already installed it, but I'm just going to show you what to select and what to click until the very end where you click install. Okay, an important note is that I think you should consider is install Xampp in the root of the C drive, not in program files. So the way I have it here, it is not installed in program files. It is installed in the root of the C drive. I suggest you do the same. Because otherwise you need to disable the user account control. So it functions. You run into some problems. Although you can surpass those problems by disabling the user account control, but it's a lot easier if you install it in the root of the C drive. Okay, so just leave it in the root of the C drive. So click next. You won't be needing all of this, so I suggest you should not install the things that you don't need. For example, you don't need an FTP FileZilla server for the web programming course. You don't need a Mercury mail server. You don't need a Tomcat, because we will use a Tomcat when we talk about Java web server-side programming, but we will install the Tomcat separately, not within Xampp. So disable this on too. You only need PHP, no Perl. You can leave Perl if you want to. You will be, although you can program PHP and work with MariaDB database without phpMyAdmin, but it certainly makes things a lot easier. This is phpMyAdmin. It's just a web interface for MariaDB and MySQL databases. So we need this. Remove these other two. So we basically need an Apache web server, MySQL or MariaDB database server, PHP interpreter, and phpMyAdmin, which is a bunch of PHP scripts, that form an interface for MySQL. Okay, then next, I suggest you leave it here. Of course, I have already installed Xampp into the C drive, but I can install it here in D. My suggestion to you is to leave it on the C drive, and then the language, and the next, and we don't need this to learn more about Bitnami. And then you click next, and it will install it. Just that's it, okay? But I won't go through with the process because I have already installed it into the C drive. So I'll click cancel here. So after you do this, okay, after you do this, then you'll have your Xampp web stack installed here in the root of the C drive. What's important here is, well, you have here, this is the Apache, these are the Apache package, the Apache files. You can go here to look in the logs. The configurations are here, the binaries are here, okay? Then this is the MySQL scripts for the server, the client. These are located here in the bin. The configuration is one of these. Actually, I don't think it's here, the configuration of MySQL, but I'll show you how to modify the configuration of the MySQL server. Okay, this is the phpMyAdmin, and this is the htdocs, which is very important. In this directory, you'll post your HTML, JavaScript, PHP files here. For example, here there are some default files, default folders, and I've created a WP folder for my web programming course, where I have all the examples here. Okay, and then you should go. In the root of Xampp, you find here some controls. This one is very good. It allows you to start and stop Apache and MySQL whenever you want to, or to change the configuration. I have already started this because I've shown you the examples, the local examples here. So it's already started for me. Let me close this and this. And let me also close the Xampp here. First I should open it. The Apache and MySQL are already started, so stop them. And then close this, and then also close this. Okay? Then go here and start it again. So after you've installed it, everything should run smoothly. You start this control, which puts itself here in the tray bar. And then you start Apache and MySQL. You start Apache and MySQL. You start it like this. If it turns green, then it's okay. It shows you the port on which it listens. And MySQL also started like this. Okay. If it turns green, it works. It shows you here the process IDs of the Apache process and the MySQL process, and here the ports on which the TCP ports on which each server listens. So Apache listens on the default 80 and 443 ports, and MySQL listens on the default 3306 ports. You can check that they work by pointing your browser for checking whether the Apache web server works. You need to point the browser to localhost. Default port is 80, so just go here, localhost. This is from my history, so localhost, yeah. And the default page is this one. If you are seeing this, then it worked and the HTTP server works. If you want to check whether the MySQL server works, you can use the phpMyAdmin. It's easier. So phpMyAdmin. The default username and password for the MySQL database are root without a password, empty password. So if you are seeing this, then it also means it works. Okay, these are the databases here. Okay, now let me close this. You may run into problems when you start Apache and MySQL from Xampp, and by far the most frequent problem is related to the ports. If there is some other application listening on these ports, then you'll have an error and it won't start. For example, if you have an Apache web server or another web server already installed on your machine, which is highly probable, then this will not start, this Apache would not start and will give you an error. The same for MySQL. If you have the MySQL web server installed separately, this would not start. And I'll show you what to do in this case. First, check whether there are some applications that listen on this port. So you should go here, type command cmd, right click this so that you run it as an administrator, so that you see information about other processes, and then netstat -t for TCP, a for all, and for printing numerical information. Do not translate IPs and ports to names. And then there is the B for showing the binary, and O, I don't remember what O comes from, and pipe this through more. Okay, and if we look here, we see here that we have this speed. Okay, we have this speed 10,604 that listens on port 80, and the process is HTTPD-XE. So we have a process, well, it's actually this process, this one, that listens on that port. And also here, the same process that listens on 443, and then here we have the MySQL process that listens on port 3306. Okay, and we see the speed of all of them. And in order to get rid of the error of not starting Apache and MySQL, you need to see what program is responsible for this speed. So 10,604, you go to the task manager. Okay, then go to details, and then should search here for the PID 10,604, which is HTTP-XE. So we go below, sorry. We should descend to HTTP because these are alphabetically ordered. So HTTP, you see this port, okay? And you can stop it right here, and task if you want to, and then try to start it, the Xampp HTTP, the Xampp Apache web server. Of course, for my case, it's exactly the Xampp Apache web server that runs, okay? And the same for MySQL. You can do the same for MySQL. But this is how you can debug what the problem is. But most of the time is the problem is that there's another application listening on those ports. And the solution in this case is just to close those applications the way I've shown you using the task manager and netstat. And another solution is just to change the ports of the Xampp Apache Web Server and MySQL Xampp MySQL server. You can change the ports by going here into config, take the first one, http dconf. You search for a directive called listen. Okay, should be here. Yeah, and you just change this port. Let's change it to 81. Okay, save this file and now stop. And then start again. And you see now that it listens on the 81 port. I didn't change the HTTP secure port, only the HTTP port. And now whenever I want to load this, for example, this doesn't work. Shouldn't work anymore. Yeah. I need to specify, for each request, I need to specify the new port, the 81, because it's not the default port anymore. It's 81. Okay. And it works. Okay. If this one doesn't work, if MySQL doesn't work, well, let's undo this. Let's undo this and stop it and start it again. If MySQL doesn't work, you need to go to the config file, myini, and you need to change the port, which is not this one because the default port for the client. You need to change the port for the server, which is here. And we can change this to, I don't know, to this one, yeah, for the MySQL server. And now I need to stop this. I think I saved the configuration file and then start it. And you see here that it's 3307. To see that it actually works, you can use the command line client of MySQL, but I'm going to show you with phpMyAdmin because it's more graphical. So now local host. We leave the default port, which is 80, because you see here the default the port that HTTP listens is 80, and then phpMyAdmin. Of course, now we run into an error because the MySQL server doesn't listen on the default port 3306 anymore. It listens on 3307, and we need to change the configuration of phpMyAdmin. So we go here to. So this is the Xampp root directory. We go here to Xampp root directory. We go here to phpMyAdmin, and you search for the file config.inc.php, and you edit this with something. And here, where you see the host, okay, where you see the host, you need to specify another port, which is 3307, and then save this file, and now try to reload this in the browser. Okay, and it works. So let's undo everything. So let's set everything to the default ports because I don't have any other service applications that listens on those ports, 80 and 3306. So close this. Go here, stop this. And go here to phpMyAdmin and undo this. Okay, then close it. Also, I'll be closing these files. I won't be needing them anymore. And then go to this text files and leave the port for the MySQL server unchanged. Okay, then close it. And then we need to start it again. Okay. So most of the problems that you will run into when using Xampp will be related to another application listening on those ports. And you solve this by either killing those applications using the task manager here, or and netstat in order to discover which are those applications, or you can change the default ports for the Apache Web Server or MySQL server in Xampp. So for my for my personal setup, this default ports work because I don't have any other applications listening on these ports. So I'll leave it this way. I'll leave it started. So you can see it here in the taskbar that it is started here. Okay, they are started. And now, so I've shown you how to deploy the Xampp web stack, and install it and deploy it on your local computer. And now let me finish the slides. I still need to show you PHP and MySQL examples, then a little bit of Ajax, and then I'll show you all these remaining examples that I have. Here, all these examples. They're not very complicated. Actually, only this one is a little bit more elaborate, this PDO model view controller, but the others are quite easy. Okay, sorry, let me... Yeah, I don't need this anymore. So I should go to the htdocs. This is the document root of all the HTML files and PHP files that are served by the local Apache web server. Okay, let me go here, yeah, and make the presentation full screen. MySQL or MariaDB is by default supported by PHP. And there was an old interface, it is still supported, called MySQL interface. The newer one is MySQL I interface. I'll be showing you examples with both. And there's also an object-oriented interface called PDO. I'll show you examples with that too. So a simple example is opening and closing a connection. This one connects to a database that runs on a local host on the default port 3306 using this user and this password, and the database is this one. Okay, if this one returns an error, if this one has an error, connection will be would be false, and if there's an error, then this function dies, terminates the execution of the PHP interpreter and returns this error. Otherwise, I write some code here and I close the connection. If I want to select something, I just connect here from the database. I just connect here, okay? And then I run this using MySQL I query. I run this select everything from persons on this connection, which is this object. Then I'm echoing some HTML fragment here, actually a table header, and then I'm fetching from this result set returned here, I'm fetching each record, each row in this, and I'm accessing the fields of the fields that I want from each row. So for instance, here I need the first name of the current record and the last name of the current record, and I write them in a table row, and I do this in a loop so that I create a table with the first name and last name of each record from the persons table. And then I close the table, and then I close the connection. So quite easy. I'm going to show you an example of this in a couple of minutes. Yeah. Then Ajax. Let me see if I can show you that example. Okay, let me... Sorry. Should have here, so this one should work. Let me show you the content of my database. I hope we have the right field. Local. Okay, this one should be okay. So I have these are the default databases, MySQL, information schema, and so on. I've created a WP database. It contains this table. So I have this users table, which has these users. I hope that this example show table, this is the source, uses that. So we have students here. So I don't have the table students. So this will probably return. Okay, I have a table student. Let me see. Yeah, I have students here. Yeah, and these are the students. Okay. So they are displayed here, but I don't have the name for student. I have name. I think it's because of these two students that don't have a name. Let's see, the source of this one is in line 8, but it displays in a table all the records from the students table. So let's see. Let me close this one. Let me close this one. Show table. Yeah. So this one fetches everything from students where name is like, okay, so I need a parameter. So I need a name parameter sent to this PHP file, okay? And I didn't send anything in the query string, so this was empty. Let me send a parameter here, so name. So name equals, well, let's see, I want to show all the students whose names contain the letter E. Okay, these are all the students that contain the letter E. Okay, what I do here is just connect to the database, and then I select everything from students where the name, I'm using this SQL SQL syntax, where the name like this % means every string concatenated with the value of name in the query string, which was E, and everything. So the name should contain any string concatenated with E, concatenated with any other string. So this is just like regular expression. And then fetch each record and display each record in a table row. And then close the table. Okay, yeah. Let me see what's here. This is Ajax. Okay. Skip that. Okay. This is the first. So I've shown you how to. I've actually shown you this form of example. This example where we can connect to a database using the MySQL interface and query something in the database. Let's quickly move to Ajax, and then at the end I'll show you the rest of the examples. Ajax means asynchronous JavaScript and XML. It basically means sending asynchronous HTTP requests from the browser to the server and getting a response in the form of XML. Ajax originates from Google. Google invented first, and then it was included in all major browsers. The response from the web server usually came in XML format, but in recent years it was replaced with the JSON format, which is a similar format to XML, but it's closely related to JavaScript. JSON comes from JavaScript object notation. So Ajax is not a programming language, it's just a technique invented first by Google and then included in major browsers. It's a technique used for creating better, faster, and more interactive web applications. With Ajax, a JavaScript can send in the background asynchronous requests on different threads of the browser to an HTTP server. It uses an XML HTTP request object, which is implemented by the browser and exposed by the browser in JavaScript API. And with this object, JavaScript code can send asynchronous requests to the web server in a different thread than the JavaScript running thread of the browser. Then the JavaScript engine thread of the browser, and it can send a request to the server, it gets a result, and in parallel add that result to the currently loaded web page, while the web page that is currently loaded remains loaded. It doesn't get reloaded. Ajax uses asynchronous data transfer, so HTTP requests, allowing the web server to pass small data to the browser, and while the user does whatever he wants to do with the currently loaded document, in the background additional data is loaded in the current document. This is very typical to infinite scrolling web pages like Facebook or Twitter, where you scroll down and additional Ajax requests are sent to the browser, are sent to the server, to the Facebook server. The currently loaded document remains loaded. It doesn't get reloaded, but additional content is added to the browser, to the currently loaded document through Ajax requests. Okay. And JSON, as I said, is JavaScript object notation. It's just a textual notation of JavaScript objects. It's a lightweight data interchange format, just like XML. It is close to JavaScript, readable by both humans and machines. We have three data types: simple data types, numbers, strings, boolean, and null. We have arrays and objects like this. This is an example, quite typical. This is an example of an object. It contains 1, 2, 3, 4 fields. The first one has the name and the value Adrian Sterka, so this one is a string. The second field with the name age, or the second property with the name age and the value is a number. The third one is a property with the name profession and the value string. And the fourth one is a property with the name courses and its value, it's an array of 2 strings, 2 courses. Okay? We can convert a JSON string. A JSON string is just a string, a sequence of characters. We can convert a JSON string into a JavaScript object or a JavaScript array in JavaScript, or we can do the reverse, convert an array, a JavaScript array or a JavaScript object into a JSON string. This is how we can convert a JSON string into a JavaScript object. So here I have this string, okay, and it is converted in an object or to an object using the JSON parse function, which is a function from the browser API. And then we can access various these fields name, age, and sex of the object using a notation like this: object.name, object.age, object.sex. Okay, like this. Backwards, we can convert JavaScript objects to JSON strings like this. So we can create an object, we add some properties to it, and then we stringify it, we convert it to a string like this. So this is a string representing this. Well, actually this with the age 25. Okay, so it's very easy to do this in JavaScript. It's also very easy to do this in PHP, and it's also easy to do this in Java and in C#. But I'll show you the Java way and the C# way in subsequent courses. This is how we do JSON handling in PHP. So in order to convert a PHP object or an associative array to JSON, we do something like this. We have this array. These are the key. This is the value and key value and then key value. And then we convert this to a JSON string by using the JSON encode function. And this one is a JSON string. And backwards, we can decode the JSON string either into an array like this, or into, with this parameter false, or into an object like this. And this array would be a PHP array, and this one would be a PHP object. Okay, Ajax, a simple example. I'm going to show you this example, but I must tell you I favorize using jQuery for sending Ajax requests, because it's a lot easier. You write less. So I'm going to show you this example. I don't think I'm going to show you. I don't think I'm going to run it in the browser, but instead I'll focus on the jQuery Ajax examples. There's a bunch of ways, several ways to do Ajax requests in jQuery, and they all involve writing less code. So instead of writing this, you write about a third of the code for performing an Ajax request. So it's a lot easier to do it in jQuery than to do it in plain vanilla JavaScript. So I have here a function that gets a reference to the XML HTTP request. Remember, this is an object from the window object of the browser, so this is implemented by the browser. And I'm calling this function here. So this function will be called show hint. This function will be called as an event handler for some event, for clicking a button or whatever in the current HTML document. I'm doing here some checks. I check whether the string is empty or not. Here I'm getting a reference here to the XML HTTP object by calling this function, which is this one. So I'm getting a reference to this object from the, remember it is implemented by the browser. If I get an error, then I just return I cannot do the Ajax request here. Otherwise, I set the URL where I want to send the request. The URL is sent to the same web server. using this path, submit PHP, and here I'm building the query string by sending a parameter q with this value and also a parameter sid with this value. And then I'm sending a GET request to this URL. This URL is this one. Okay. And I wait for the result. And when the result returns, this callback function is called on ready state change. When the result is returned from the HTTP server as a response to this request. Actually, the request, the socket is open here, but the request is sent here. Okay, so when sending this request, when I receive an answer asynchronously from the web server, this function gets called. This one, state change, which is this one, which just checks whether the state is 4, which means everything went okay, return code 200, and the result would be the result returned by the HTTP server will be in this response text of the XML HTTP object here, and I just display it in a, I don't know, in a div or whatever this is. I'm just displaying it in a div in a current document. Okay, let me show you examples in jQuery. So this one sends a get Ajax request. So the HTTP method is get to this script, show students from group -get PHP. The parameters or the query string, the properties or the fields sent in the query string are group ID equal to 2 and name equal to Forest. Okay, and this function gets executed when a response is received. This is the data received from the HTTP server, and this is the status. And I just display this data in a div here. I can also do this, what I've done here, using Ajax, but here I can specify the method, get, post, head, put, delete, whatever. This is the URL. This is the data, so the query string, having 2 fields, group ID with the value 2 and name with the value Forest, and this is the function that gets executed when the result is success. And I could have also specified another function that can be executed when the result is an error. So when the HTTP server sends me a response different than 200. Okay. Some other examples. This is the similar example like this one, but it uses post. So the same way I'm calling this URL with this query string, but this time the HTTP method is post, and this function gets executed when the result is received from the server, from the HTTP server. Another useful book, it's PHP. It's a free open source book, PHP the Right Way, where you can read about PHP programming, PHP software design patterns, and so on. You can read this if you want, if you have time. It's useful lecture. Okay, I think this is the last slide. Yeah. So let me step out of the full screen mode and let me show you the rest of the examples. So these are the tables I'm using in the database. So user, students, group. You can create a new table here, and yeah, you specify. So I specify the name, the type of the columns, the name and the type. The type can be integer or varchar, and then the length of the varchar. You can specify here whether this is a primary index. You can specify here whether it is auto-incremented, and then you just click save. Okay, I won't create another table. I'll just go to this one. You see it here. You can execute SQL queries here if you want to by pressing this, and I can select star from students. You just write it here where I don't know, name equals student, or let me see, stud. So it starts with stud and then a %. So the name should start with stud, and then go, and it executes the select, and it shows me the result here. So this is useful for if you have an error in PHP. It's very useful to actually print the SQL statement that you want to run using echo. So it will be printed here in the browser, and then you copy it from here, and then you run it here to see if it works, to see what kind of error you have. If I have time, I'll show an example of this. Well, actually, let me show you right now an example of this. So I have this. Let me break this and make it. Let me break this so that it doesn't work. Let's add some s's there. And let's try to run it again here. Okay. So now it's an error on line 13. Okay. This one says that this one is not a result set. It's actually it's boolean, is true or false. And when you get an error like this, it's very useful to actually print the SQL query to see whether the error is related to the database server or related to PHP. So just use echo. Actually, I don't need this, and like that. Okay. Let's print this, and then let's run it again. Okay, and then I take this. Okay, I take it from here, and I try to run it into the phpMyAdmin here. Okay, so go to SQL and here. Okay, and when I try to run it, it will tell me that a table does not exist. Of course, because I don't have this table, I only have this one. Okay, so it's very useful to do debug this way. So let me undo what I've destroyed here. So whenever you get an error, you should first check whether it is an SQL error by printing the SQL statement using echo into the browser window. And then you take it from the browser window and run it through the phpMyAdmin. So let me close this one because we don't need it. Let me show you the other examples. So these are the tables that we will be using. I don't think we need this anymore. Maybe just let's leave it here. The console maybe. Okay, let's go. This is Ajax. This is Ajax, the example that I've shown you using plain JavaScript. I think this is the one. And it shows me something. It shows me the students in an alert. But in display them here. I'm not going to show you this because it's a lot of text. So I've shown you simple examples, session examples. Okay, let's go to Ajax jQuery. Okay, here. This is Ajax jQuery and this is Ajax using Json. So this one gets all the students from group 2. Actually, let us see the request here. So let's reload this. So this is the page, okay? And when I click here, the page does not get reloaded, but another request is sent here to show student, and the response is the one that's displayed here. We can actually see the response. This is the query string, and the response is here, okay? And it is displayed here as a table, okay? Sorry, I didn't want to do this. Headers, yeah. The source of this Ajax jQuery get is it's the actual example I've shown you on the slides. This one. So this is with jQuery. I have this div which is empty, and this button. Whenever I click this button, then this function gets executed, and the function just sends a get request to show students from group get, and with this parameter group ID 2 name test. I think the name is not used. Let me open this, show students from group get PHP. Yes, I'm only using group ID. I'm not using the name, and return the results in a table. Okay, so this is Ajax, but the result is returned from the web server in an HTML file, so not XML, not JSON. Okay, a similar example is this one with post. It's the same way, but instead of doing a get, we do a post, and we send this to students from group post, which is another file. This one, which is similar, but I get the parameter from post. From the underscore post superglobal. Okay, let me show you how this works. It works the same. It just uses the post request here. Okay, So there's no query parameter here. There's no query string here, okay, but it is in the body, and you actually see it here too, and test. It displays the same thing. All the students from group 2. Okay, so I've shown you this example with get. This one. There's this example, yeah, which uses the Ajax method for sending a GET request. It works similarly. Okay, let me show you the last one. This one, they use the jQuery here, so they all send a request to this, either this PHP, which is used for GET, or this one, which is used for POST. So this one works the same way. Yeah. Now let me show you some examples where, so in this examples here, I'm sending an Ajax request using jQuery, and I get a result from the server as an HTML text, which is displayed in a div. I'm going to show you the same examples, but this time I'm getting the response from the server in as JSON strings, which I converted to objects in JavaScript, and then I display parts of those, some properties of those objects are displayed in the current document. So, let me see what's the source code. So I think I'll start with this one, which is just a simple example, which just sends. So when the window is loaded, it executes this run, which sends a Ajax request, which expects a JSON string from the server to this JSON server, and it sends the parameter with the value ID. The query string is the value ID, and the name is ID, and the value is 567. And then when it gets a result, it executes this show, giving the parameter the JSON object returned by the server, and I just display the hello field. Let me open the JSON server PHP file. This one, which just sets the header so that it doesn't get cached. Sets this header fields are set in order not to get cached. I set the response type, the content type of this response to be application JSON. It works without these 3 lines. And I'm getting the parameter from the request, the ID, and I'm creating an array with 2 components, one with the key hello, the other one with the key 3. They both have as value the ID, and then I'm encoding this array into JSON and returning here. So here I'm just displaying the hello property, and I'm ignoring the there property. Okay, let me see if it works. So JSON client calls the JSON server. Okay, it shows me in an alert this because of this alert JSON hello. Okay, we should be able to see it here, the response. Yeah, so the response is this string. It's a JSON string. Hello. It's a JSON string with 2 properties, hello and 3. They both have the same value, 567. So this is the easiest JSON example. Let me show you another one. This one, which calls this show students from group and gets them in a JSON expression and then displays them here. Actually, I think it's only one student. You can see it here. Yeah, so only one student. Let me show you the source. So this one, when the window is loaded, when the document is loaded, it executes run, which calls show students from group get JSON with the parameter ID1, and calls function show, which just gets this JSON and displays the ID property of the JSON object, the name, the password, and the group ID. And this file, the server side, is this one, which is just the similar one. Connects, gets the parameter from the request, selects the record with this ID, and returns this ID in an array, in this array, sets the fields, and calls JSON encode to encode this array with only one component, with only one object, into a JSON string, and returns this string. So quite easy, quite straightforward. And then this JSON object is automatically converted by this Ajax function into a JavaScript object where which is passed as parameter to this show function here, and I can access directly the properties of this JSON object. Okay, so this this one, so this PHP code encodes this PHP array into a JSON. That is a string, a JSON string. You can see it here. This is the string, okay? But this string is received by the JavaScript code by this method in jQuery, which automatically converts it to a JavaScript object. So it converts the JSON string to a JavaScript object, and it calls this function show with that object as parameter. And I can just refer to the properties of that object the regular way we do it in JavaScript by using the dot notation. Okay, let me close this one. So the rest of the examples are this one that uses PDO, this other object-oriented interface for working with MySQL data, and this one which is let's say a more complicated application, but not that complicated, that uses the model view controller pattern in order to return something from the database. So let me show you this one. Select, it selects one student from database and adds one student here. So let me close this one, and I need this one, so select. What happens here is I include this file, dbutils. Let me show you this file. This is just a file which has some properties, private fields, and this is the constructor. I specified the data source name, so the data source is MySQL, the host is the value of this one, the database is this one, the char set is this one, which is UTF-8, and then I set some options, the most important one being this one, that it returns result into an associative array. And here I'm creating this PDO object. Okay, I'm creating this PDO object, giving as parameters the data source name, the user, and the password, and these options. Okay, if there is an error, I print the error. Otherwise, I store the object into PDO. And I have a bunch of functions. A select function that executes this query, selects everything from this table, and returns it as an associative array here. This one inserts something into the table, so inserts this ID and a value here. This one deletes something based on an ID and returns the number of rows affected. This one updates something, the ID with this value. And this one, I'm actually using this function. It adds, so it calls this the PDO object, which is created here. This one. Remember, every property local to the current object needs to be accessed using this prefix, this and arrow prefix. So this one executes insert into users, the values user and password, inserting this user and this password to this one. To this table, to the users table, and the users table is here. This table. It inserted forest and 3 lines as password. And so here I'm instantiating an object of type dbutils described here. This is the class dbutils. Okay. And then I'm calling the select everything from students, this one, select, okay. I'm just returning the first record from this result set, and actually only the value of the name property of the first record, the value of the name field of the first record, and then I'm calling this to add this user to the table, and that's it. And that's why we see these users added. If I refresh this, there will be a fourth user added. Okay, there should be a fourth user. Let me refresh this. Okay, a fourth user added. Yeah, so this is the example. This is the PDO example. This. Okay, let me show the final example, PHP example, and that's the model view controller, this one. By the way, for the lab, you don't really need to do a model view controller application, or you don't need to use the jQuery in order to call Ajax. You can do it the way you want to, the way it looks, the way you understand it, the way it looks better to you. I personally suggest using Ajax in jQuery and Json. Not necessarily doing a model view controller, applying or implementing a model view control pattern, but it's all, you can do that. It is useful. So let me show you this one. So this is the first page. What it does, it's also these simple things. Get the details about the user. Let me try it. So no, I don't think this one exists. Student one. So gets the detail of a user and display them here, and get all the grades which are displayed here. That's it. But the way it does this is first the request gets to a controller. The controller calls something from the model, which calls something from the repository, and then that result is returned to the UI, to the browser, using the view. So let me show you that example. So we will close this. Also close this. Don't need this. I'm using jQuery here. Maybe I can show. Let me show the. I can also show it here. So this is the first page, which is just the UI. This is the controller. It contains the controller. This one just contains the jQuery. This is the model. It contains a model which is used for calling functions from the repository. This is a student, just a setter and getter class for student. This is the DBUtil class implementing the repository, directly discussing with the database. And this is the view that generates the view. So we have here the model, the view, and the controller, and the auxiliary class for discussing with the database. So let's start with the first page. This one. What this one does is, let me go to the HTML part. So it has this sections for getting the user and for getting all the grades, and another section where I display the result. Here, for getting the user, I just, so I have this button get user. So in document ready, when the document is loaded, when I click the button get user, I send a get request, a get JSON jQuery request, so that the result is a JSON, to the controller PHP with the parameters action get user, and the user is the value of this user field, which is this one, this user field. Okay. And for this other section, when I click this button get grades, this one doesn't have any parameter. I send the same the request, another JSON get request to the same controller as here. But this time only the action parameter is specified, get all grades. And here we had the action get user with an additional parameter user. Here we don't need any user. And when the result is received, I call this method show user, and here I call this method show grades. Let me quickly show you the methods show user and show grades, and then I'll show you the backend part, so the code in PHP, because this is JavaScript executed in browser. Show user just receives the user and as an object, as a JavaScript object, actually as a JSON string, but which is converted by jQuery to a JavaScript object, and we only display the fields of the JavaScript object in this content, which is set as the content of the inner HTML content of this main section. Okay, then for the second use case, the show grades method. Well, this is a little bit more complicated because it's the JSON string is an array of objects, an array of grades. Okay, so this this object, which is an array of grade objects, is received here. It is automatically converted to an object in JavaScript, to a vector. You know that in JavaScript an object is an array. So it's automatically converted to an object or an array by the jQuery code. And here I just create a table template, table header, and then I'm taking all these grades and I'm parsing all the components of the grades array. And for each element, I call this function, which goes from there to there. So I'm saving this element to student. I'm doing this so that I display even rows or odd rows with a different background color than even rows. It doesn't matter. So I'm setting here a class for even rows. Yeah, it doesn't matter. And here I'm generating the content by accessing the fields of the current element, lm id, name and group id. I'm adding them to the table row, and then I'm accessing the grades field of the student. And this grades field, grades property is another vector, it's another array, and I'm parsing each grade, and then I'm setting the course and the grade into this content, which is set. It's added to the content in specific in a table data, and here we close the table row. Okay, and here we add it to the table. I can also show you the actual JSON returned here. It is this one. Let me show you. Okay, so I have this ID1, name student, password 1, group ID1, grades, and you see the grades. This is grade 7 for web programming. Okay. This is grade 8. So you can actually see here the JSON string. Actually, I think I can. Let me try to copy it and put it here. Yeah, put it here. So I have this student, first one with this grades, then here. So the first student is from here to here. The second student is from here to here, and so on. Okay, they are all from well, not all. Most of them are from Marvel Universe, as you see here. Okay, don't save this. Let me. Okay, so and here I'm parsing the grades array that contains students. I take each student here, each student from the array, and I display it here. And then I take the grades field of the student, which is another array, and I take all the grades and display it in this table data using breaks here, using new lines. And then this content is set as the value of the main div, and that's it. So both use cases send a get JSON request to this controller, but this one uses the action get user, and this other one uses the action get all grades. This one has another parameter in the request. This one does not have a parameter. So we should start the backend description from the controller PHP. So let's start with the controller PHP. Okay, this one requires require once is just required is just like require, so it includes this file but only once. So if this file includes this PHP file, which includes another PHP file, which then includes this PHP file, in the case that this one is included several times, it will only be included once. That's the difference between require once and require. And of course it will give me an error if this one doesn't exist or this one doesn't exist. This is just a model, and this is just a view. You will see you'll see in a minute what this files contain. This controller has a view and a model here. They are instantiated here in the constructor. Okay, and then it has a function service. Okay, another function getUser, and another function getAllGrades. And this is where the class ends. In the rest of the file, an object of type controller is instantiated here, and the method service is called here. That's it. This is the actual main code of this file that gets executed when the... Why did I close? I shouldn't have closed this. When this is... So when this request is sent here, the only code that gets executed in the controller is this object instantiation and this service method. In the service method, I check whether the action parameter is set and not empty. The action is this one. For the first request, the action is getUser. For the second type of request, the action is getAllGrades. So if the request parameter is not empty, if it is getUser, then I call on this object, I call this method, which is equal to the name of the action, which is getUser. So I'm just calling this method getUser, which is here, with the parameter, the value of the user, the value of the user property, which is this one, taken from the user field here. This is the user property. Okay, so I'm calling this method, I'm calling the method dynamically. So this $_get action in curly braces is replaced with the actual value of the action parameter in the request, which is getUser here, and here it is getAllGrades. This one, getAllGrades, which is here. Okay. And this method just calls another method getStudent from the model using this user as parameter, and this student is then given as parameter to a method called output from the view. And the same here, it calls the getAllGrades from the model, and these grades are sent as parameter to the output method of the view. Okay, so let me now show you the view. Actually no, let me show you the model first and then the view. So model is this one. It has it requires this database utils, which is a function that connects to the database, which is a class. Well, let me show you the class. You've already seen it in the previous example. So this class just connects to this database using PDO. And it has some generic methods: select from students, select students by name, select all students, select grade for student, and everything is returned as an associative array. Insert something in a table, delete from a table, but these are not used. Insert and delete, and update is also not used. So the only functions that are used by my MVC application are the only functions that are used by my MVC applications are this one: select one student, select all students, select grade for student, and without insert. Only these ones. Okay, and here in the model, I'm just instantiating an object of type dbutils, and I store it here. And then I have this function getStudent and getAllGrades, which are called from the controller. So get student and get all grades. So get student just calls the select student method from the dbutil object with the parameter user. And then, as I know there's only one user with that name, I only take the first record from the result set, and I take the ID field, the name field, the password field, and the group field from this first record of the result set, and I create a student object with these values, and this student is returned here. I can also show you the student model, which is this one. It just contains setter and getter. Sorry, it just contains getters, and the setting is done. The setters are the setting of the value is done in the constructor. It just contains getters, and this method which serializes this class implements Json serializable, so it implements this method. Which is useful in order to serialize this student object. Okay, let me go here. Okay, this one is returned here in the model. Let me also show you this other method. This one selects all students, and for each student, I parse this result set. I'm taking the key, and actually I'm only using the value, I think. And I'm taking all the grades for one student, and I put them into this grades array. And then I'm setting the grades property of this stud object to this grades. And I'm adding this stud object to the students array here, and I'm returning this array. Okay, so this one returns one student object, and this one returns an array with stud objects, where a stud object is contains a student and grades. Okay, a vector of grades, and this student and students with grades are then returned, are then displayed using the view in the controller. So after I'm getting the student and the all grades of the student in the model, I'm calling this output from the view to display the grades and to display the student. Actually, to encode the student as a JSON string, which is then sent to the browser, and to encode the grades as a JSON string, and which is then sent to the browser. Let's see the view, which is this one. So just the constructor, what it does here, it just calls JSON encode on student, and this one calls JSON encode on this parameter, which is just the array of is this one, the array of students with grades. Okay. This JSON encode works for simple data types, but if you want to encode an object, then that object student needs to, as I said, implement JSON serializable. So this function, which just gets the properties of this table and returns the properties of this. Sorry, it gets the properties of this object and returns those properties. That's it. So this is the model view controller PDO example, which is shown here, and it is here in this zip archive on the web programming course page. So this is the PHP course. Hopefully you've understood everything. So this is it.